358 Days Over 2 is one of the most misunderstood games in the series simply because of this fact. It's different. It doesn't play like the rest. The gameplay is too sluggish. All of these comments and more have plagued me over the years, whether it's through the comments or just in one-on-one conversations, but one that I've been noticing more and more lately is that the Disney worlds feel empty and meaningless in comparison to past entries. Well, to be honest, in some aspects I kind of agree. The worlds don't really have the same charm as their mainline counterparts despite being only lower resolution versions of them. In a way, they almost feel lived in and explored, assuming you've already been playing the games in release order, but honestly guys, that's kind of the point. This is going to sound a little silly, but you're meant to feel like you've already been here before, so that you're lulled into thinking that nothing has changed and that this is just another happy-go-lucky adventure through the Disney worlds with your Disney pals. Only, it's not that way at all. You might see this world lineup and think, yeah, I've been to these places before, but the way you were progressing through it last time and the way you experience the world and interact with it now are completely different. It's not about how the world looks, but the way you approach it as someone who's not supposed to be there. Still confused by what I mean? Then allow me to take you through them all one by one and show you how Days did Disney differently. After putting Roxas through a series of tests in Twilight Town for the first week or so, Xigbar takes us to our first new world. As you'll see in most first visits, we're ordered to take a look around the town and investigate points of interest. By the end of the mission, you come to the conclusion that the city was hit by some kind of sandstorm, as evident by the piles of sands in bizarre places, and the city itself looking like a construction zone. So we can surmise that between the time Sora was here with his crew in Kingdom Hearts 1 and now, something catastrophic must have happened. I love this method of visual storytelling, and it's something I wish we saw more in Kingdom Hearts 2, similar to that part in the Land of Dragons where you go into the cave when the town is intact, and then when you come back out, it's completely burned to the ground. On our way to RTC, you can go one of two ways. You can go through the main entrance that divides the shopping area and the palace gates, or the top door that you can reach with some platforming. On your first playthrough, you will naturally go through the easier path, and Xigbar will point out that we're not alone, and it would be safer to take a different route. So after taking that second way, you'll observe Aladdin and Jasmine conversing, but only from afar, never interacting with them directly. They start talking about what's been going on with the town and all the sandstorms to kind of serve as a reconfirmation of what we already know. But did you notice it yet? The difference in approach? That plotline is kind of put on the back burner, however, since Roxas slips into a coma after this mission, and when he comes back, he's with Axel, and the two of them tail Pete through one of the worst missions in the game. But again, this is more of what we were seeing earlier, the difference between how Roxas and Sora approach the different worlds and characters. If this was Sora, he wouldn't just tail behind Pete in hopes of learning what he's up to, he'd just rush in and beat the truth out of him. On a different day, partnered with Xion, we do get around to kicking Pete's dumb trunk ass to the curb after exploring the Cave of Wonders all the way to the end, but he never did find the magic lamp he was after. On their way back to RTC, Roxas and Xion run across Genie and Carpet, and they have a brief conversation about trusting one's friends, where they tell the Genie that Aladdin didn't want to rely on Genie's magic to help fix the city. Despite this, however, Genie thinks he wouldn't mind if he at least got rid of the sandstorm for him, so with a flick of his wrist, he gets rid of it, opening up a new area for exploration in the world. When we return for a different day, the area outside the main gate is now accessible. I love when stuff like this happens in games, slowly unlocking new places to investigate, and it's especially interesting here because the area we unlocked is actually an area from Kingdom Hearts 2 that's just been buried under 100 feet of sand. The cause of this, and the sandstorms, Roxas finds out, is none other than a giant Heartless, the antlion. It burrows beneath the sand, tossing it everywhere, and creates twisters to throw debris all over the place. So with that information, we can assume that if the Heartless didn't attack the city directly, then at the very least it was causing enough mayhem to distress it from afar by simply existing. Agrabah was my least favorite world in Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, so for it to be one of my favorites in this entry really should say something about how good its plotline really is. The way the plotlines all carefully fall into place is just really satisfying to me. The Beast Castle world plotline is mostly centered around setting up Xaldin's interest in the Beast from Kingdom Hearts 2, but it also serves as Roxas's first introduction to the concept of love and caring for others. It all begins when he comes to the castle for the first time. He's sent there on a mission to stop a Heartless, which he thought was the cause of a roar he heard emanating from the castle, but it turns out that wasn't it at all. I love how they've set up the Beast's first appearance in such a way to pose him as this terrifying presence for Roxas. The next time he's there, it's with Xion, and he tells her all about it before they start investigating. The best part of looking at all of these scratch marks and footprints and even a noticeably dirty wall is that all the while, these two are convinced it was the Heartless who caused it. Along the way, the two run into Lumiere, who's talking aloud to himself as he paces the West Wing's main hall. Roxas and Xion deduce from the way he's talking that he must be a servant of the castle. The candelabra also mentions a master, which makes the duo curious about him, but in order to find out more about this mysterious master of the castle, they must sneak past Lumiere. Again, very different from how Sora would approach this situation. You see, the organization puts a very important emphasis on avoiding contact with the local residents of each world while on mission, which is why, with a few exceptions here and there, there's no direct interactions with any of the Disney cast and our protagonists unless it's unintentional. When they reach their destination in the West Wing, Roxas takes a peek into the master bedroom at the end of the hall and sees the hulking form of a monstrous beast talking to himself, and his reaction to him is just insane. He refers to the beast as a thing and is initially pretty startled by him, which says something about Roxas, who has fought pretty scary foes already. This also shows us that even as a nobody, he can feel fear, letting us in on the fact that this whole not having feelings thing is total bullshit. On a separate visit, they're tasked with hunting down a Neo Shadow. They defeat it together, and then we get to see exactly how fearsome the beast can be when he absolutely decimates two more Neo Shadows that spawned after the first was beaten. It's from this that the duo deduces that the beast is fighting the Heartless himself to defend his castle as well as all of its residents. This causes them to think about their own situation with Xemnas, because if the castle they lived in were attacked, it wouldn't be Xemnas who would defend it, but them. To me, this feels like a wake-up call for Roxas and Xion that helps them realize where they stand in the organization, which, as Roxas puts it, is kind of like servants to Xemnas. In more missions with both Xion and Xaldin to the world, Roxas learns more and more about the castle and its residents, including the girl named Belle, who he is surprised to learn is actually human. While his attention seems to be on finding out what happened to the people who live there, Xaldin, however, is much more interested in finding out more about the beast and corrupting him. He learns of the rose that the beast seems to covet and tries to convince Roxas that the only reason the beast is fighting the Heartless is to protect that. Roxas, on the other hand, believes it might be because he wants to protect the people staying in the castle, but can't quite figure out why he would. It's not until later on, when he goes to the world again to stop the giant Heartless known as the Infernal Engine, that he begins to understand it better. The beast is beaten up pretty badly while trying to fight it himself, and when Roxas returns from defeating it, he pays witness to Belle coming out to take him into her arms. She shows such concern, such compassion for him. The beast shows concern for her too, telling her to flee back into the castle before she tells him that the enemy is already gone. The two confess that they couldn't bear to see the other get hurt, and the beast tells her that a master must protect his castle, and the people in it. This confirms what Roxas already suspected, that the beast really was fighting to protect the people who live here, to protect her, because she is what matters most to him, not the rose. He just can't figure out why he did it, but then, as if on cue, Xaldin appears and tells Roxas about the feeling called love. It's an emotion that nobodies cannot feel, or at least that they're not supposed to, and he bitterly tells Roxas that the love between Belle and the beast will eventually wither and die. Roxas doesn't fully believe him, and so with the help of a half-assed explanation from Axel, he kind of comes to his own conclusion that love is just fighting to protect what matters most to you. This lesson comes at the perfect time for him because of all the stuff happening with Xion at this time in the story, and he feels the need to protect her from this point on until the end of the story. Olympus Coliseum, home of heroes and quite possibly one of the most impactful worlds to Sora's character development. So, how does it fare for his counterpart? Let's see. Xigbar and Roxas arrive in Olympus for a standard investigation mission. He tells Roxas that the organization is always on the lookout for new potential recruits to help refill their ranks, when suddenly they're attacked by Heartless. As we know by now, the organization likes to keep a low profile for these sorts of things, so when Roxas is suddenly approached by Phil, thinking he's a new trainee, you already know it's going to be a very different experience compared to everything so far. Xigbar disappears before Phil can see him too, and only comes back after the satyr leaves to tell Roxas that he should continue the mission on his own now that he's already let his name slip and unintentionally signed up for hero training. But before he leaves, he tells Roxas that he cares about his future. Roxas really seems to impress Phil with his barrel smacking abilities, so much so that he thinks Roxas might be a real help because they need all the help he can get. It seems the organization isn't the only one trying to recruit more staff, because Hercules has been wearing himself out playing in the games and fending off Heartless, which is nice to learn here since we see the result of that in Kingdom Hearts 2. He also tells Roxas about the games, and Roxas really wants to enter, but Phil thinks that while he shows promise, he's still not quite ready. So Roxas RTCs with anticipation of his next visit. When he comes back a few days later for a heart collection mission, Phil asks him to handle a particularly strong Heartless in the form of a land armor, since Herc is unavailable at the moment, and after he's done beating it as a quote-unquote warm-up, Phil puts him through more barrel bashing training. Needless to say, he's becoming more and more impressed with Roxas as time goes on, but never outright says it to his face, only bragging in secret to Hercules. Xigbar would accompany Roxas once or twice more to Olympus for Heartless hunts, and I'd like to think that Roxas comes to see Xigbar as someone who's a prime example of strength, which will contrast perfectly to his other, much weaker and lazier partner for this world, Demyx. You see, Demyx is the epitome of laziness, and he makes it known to us at every opportunity during our visits together to the Colosseum. He hates getting into fights, and getting sweaty too apparently. When he and Roxas visit for the first time, they split up to cover more ground, but really it's just so he can slack off. Roxas goes into the Colosseum to see Phil putting Hercules through some truly grueling training, and when Demyx sees that, he immediately slips away again. Later on, Roxas asks him why he was pushing Hercules so much harder than he does with him, and Phil says that the reason is because he has high hopes that he will be the best hero he will ever train. He also tells Roxas that he has high expectations for him as well, which causes him to come to the conclusion that people work you harder when they have higher expectations for you, which is why the organization constantly puts him on tough missions. The day of the games, Roxas happens to participate, and Demyx hangs back again to do his own thing. Roxas clears his way to the final round, and Phil pulls him aside to congratulate his new student. He lets him know that his next opponent will be his toughest yet, and to do his absolute best because he expects big things from Roxas. Roxas takes this as an order, but Phil rephrases it and says that he has faith that he will win, and ushers him off to his final match, which just so happens to be against Xigbar. Their fight concludes without a true winner because the guard armor Heartless crashes the party, but this was apparently all a test from Xigbar to see how Roxas' training has been paying off. This entire time, both Xigbar and Phil were pushing Roxas to become stronger. Maybe it was for different reasons, but the end result is the same, and him vanquishing the formidable Heartless was the proof. I like to think Roxas puts in all the effort that he does to get stronger so that he can do what he learned from his time at Beast Castle, to protect what matters most to him, thereby making the lesson he learns from this world that no matter what, nothing is handed to you without hard work and the will to become your best self. Halloween Town is usually a lot of people's favorite Disney World and mainline entries, and I mean, how can it not be? The Nightmare Before Christmas, along with its cast, is incredibly memorable and fun, and the way it was incorporated into the games prior to this one was pretty interesting, all things considered. This world is also pretty interesting mechanically speaking, since it's got some great world interactivity. But I must confess that this world is where our trend of Roxas learning a lesson sort of falls short. Let me explain. The Halloween Town visits follow a pattern every time you come here. Roxas always does his mission, gets a pumpkin bomb chucked at his head by Lock, Shock, and Barrel, and somehow Jack is constantly coming up with new ideas for the New Year's Halloween celebration because of something Roxas does. The world does have its good points, don't get me wrong. Like how the inventions Jack comes up with add a fresh spin to the gameplay each time. There's also a fun bit of world interactivity in the form of a bombable wall that your inner Zelda fan will certainly enjoy. And the overarching mystery involving the infamous world boss known as the Leech Grave is some of the most bone-chilling stuff to ever come out of a Kingdom Hearts game. If you'd like to know more about that and what else goes on in this world, I recommend you check out this video here sometime. But all in all, this world might have the least impact on Roxas's character. There's no real lesson learned, and the only Disney character we kind of interact with is Zero. So, it's a good world, just not for the purpose of what we're discussing here today. Let's see if the next place we visit is any different. It's Wonderland, isn't it? Wonderland is my least favorite in the lineup. It's the most bland and annoying world of all, with just a couple of cool callbacks to Kingdom Hearts 1. The biggest takeaway from it is when Roxas gets to talk to the Cheshire Cat, who tells him to believe in his heart as it will tell him who to trust or not. We could take this as a lesson to Roxas that he should trust his friends and let his heart decide for itself when making life-altering choices, but otherwise, yeah, all the other good stuff is pretty much just callbacks to when Sora was here in Kingdom Hearts 1. The stuff with Luxord is cool, but it's not like it sets up anything for Kingdom Hearts 2, since his dedicated world in that one is actually the Caribbean. I have nothing else I want to add, since even mechanically the only interesting thing is the stealth missions that take place in the hedge mazes, but those just annoy me to no end. So then, what comes next? Neverland is the only world completely original to this game, with its own original score of music to accompany it. I know that we visited Hook's ship in Kingdom Hearts 1, and later on a different version of Neverland in Birth by Sleep, but this area is completely original to Days, and it honestly has a good plot to it as well. Roxas arrives in Neverland to track down a Heartless, as usual, when he comes across Captain Hook and Mr. Smee digging for some buried treasure that Hook found a map to. However, the one they dig up ends up being filled with nothing but garbage. This pisses off Hook so much and causes darkness to swell from within him because of his greedy lust for treasure. This darkness attracts some nearby Heartless, and seeing them, the piratey duo decide to flee back to the ship, leaving Roxas to destroy the Heartless on his own. After that's done though, he decides to go after them to find out more. When he gets there though, Hook and Smee have already left and plotted a course for a new spot marked for treasure on a different map, since apparently he's got multiple. Tinkerbell happens to be nearby and overhears this and flies off. She bumps into Roxas, who she mistakes for Sora as memory of him would suggest. She decides to help Roxas fly by giving him some pixie dust, and at first he doesn't believe he could do it, but then he does. It's a spectacular moment that mirrors Sora's first time flying in Kingdom Hearts 1 perfectly. This is how you do callbacks. Tinkerbell tries to usher Roxas to come help her stop Hook, and at first he really wants to, but decides that for the sake of a fake agreement with Saïx, he should focus on his mission instead. By the end of his first visit, he feels terrible about leaving Tinkerbell to her own devices when she asked for his help, but he also gets the funniest feeling that he's flown before. In future missions to the world, Tinkerbell would continue to ask Roxas for some help after giving him pixie dust, and for one reason or another he almost always avoids helping her, and time again he feels awful about it, until one day Hook and Smee actually capture her, and Roxas seems at war with himself over if he should help her or not again. But during the plot at this time, Roxas has been struggling to choose between his orders and his personal feelings that may or may not even exist. The organization has been mistreating Xion since the day he met her, And I feel that he connected that fact of mistreatment to the situation before him now with Tinkerbell, and finally decided that enough was enough. So he helps her, and it ends up helping him finish his mission too. He'd come back one more time to help Tinkerbell stop Hook and Smee once and for all, when Hook's greed finally becomes so strong that he summons the terrifying ruler of the sky, Heartless, and it just so happens to be part of his mission again anyhow, so in the end it works out when the Heartless is beaten by him and it crashes into Hook's ship, absolutely decimating it. By the end of it, Roxas did help out his new friend Tinkerbell because it was the right thing to do, but he was also still just following his orders because that's who he is. He has blindly followed what the organization has told him to do since the day he came into existence, and when he finally realizes that, he snaps and starts to take charge of his life. And at the core of everything stands the reason for him existing at all.
Can you feel Sora?
Can you feel Sora?
Diz, he could feel Sora.
You see, at his core, a large part of who Roxas is, his personality, his feelings, and the way he treats others is because of Sora. From the very beginning, when we see these flashes of Sora's memories playing whenever Roxas or Xion sees a familiar place or person, that's Sora's heart getting excited, and Roxas is just confused by it because he just doesn't know these people. So when I say that Days handled the worlds differently, I mean just one thing. The organization is what prevented Roxas from having his own Disney Friends-filled adventure because he was told to avoid them at all costs. He is the villain, and he needs to be sneaky, be precise, and follow orders because that's what they need him to be. A weapon. If Sora's journey was about freedom, then Roxas's was about learning to achieve a freedom of his own. I hope you enjoyed hearing me ramble about Days once again. To tell you the truth, I felt like I was kind of retreading a lot of the same territory in this video as I did my last one, and that's mostly because I began writing them at the exact same time, but more than anything, I just hope that I got my message across correctly. Happy March Caprice, everyone! I've been Key, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.